Well, welcome everybody to the second part of our first episode of HeterochroMEDIA. Here at HeterochroMEDIA, we take two different types of media, be it a movie, be it a television show, be it a novel, be it a music album, whatever. Two things that make us remind us of another media. So we're comparing different types of media. We're not saying that these are directly related, that one directly inspired the other, but we find themes that happen in both. So we like to compare and contrast them. Now, for this first episode, last part, we were discussing the anime based off of a light novel known as 86. And for part two, we are comparing it to the 1989 war film, Glory. So, I guess this one kind of starts with me. My name is Spencer, also associated with Freedom Productions.
And I'm Connor, also known as A Humble Collector.
I'm Jess, formerly known as Jess.
Formerly known as Jess. Very good, very good.
Thank you.
Let me move that microphone into the center. Microphone. Did I just say
microphone?
Microphone. Why is it... We have a very shoestring budget here at HeterochroMEDIA. You know, it was perfectly fine earlier.
Yeah, but then you touched it.
Then I touched it.
Don't touch
Did
it.
everything change when the Fire Nation attacked? So, where 86 was introduced to me and Jess by Connor, this one has been introduced to Jess and Connor by me.
Yes.
Glory is a... I've said it for so many times now. It came out in 1989 as an award film. This is a movie based on the story of the 54th Massachusetts, which is considered by Maine historians to be the first all-black regiment in the Union Army during the American Civil War. So, in the beginning, when the United States created in 1776, no, we're not going to go that far into the history. The movie follows the first colonel of the 54th, Robert Gould Shaw, and gives a dramatization of his efforts to raise the regiment, to train them, get them ready for battle, and then for the regiment to be brutally wrecked at the Battle of Fort Wagner, where they gained the admiration of everybody else in the Union Army for their bravery shown. So I was first introduced to this film by my mother many moons ago. There it is, the first DVD. It's sitting right over there. Look at that. Yeah, it's pretty banged up. Plays just fine.
Well worn.
The only movie I've ever bought from a Best Buy. I can say my parents bought it. Yeah, they're always too expensive, the Best Buy. But I think we were buying a TV or something, and on the way home, on the way out of the store, Mom saw it. It's like, young Spencer loves learning about the American Civil War. I need to get him into some good movies. And it has Denzel Washington, and I must make sure he becomes a Denzel Washington.
Freeman.
It does have God in it as well.
Yes, God is in the movie.
This movie involves Ferris Bueller, it involves the Equalizer, and it involves God. Oh, and also has the Dread Pirate Roberts in it. What can go wrong?
It's a good cast of characters.
Yeah, it's a very good cast of characters. So I watched it, and as a kid, I enjoyed it. It wasn't one of my favorite movies about the Civil War. That would probably go to Gettysburg, because when I say I am a nerd, I like slow-moving dialogue with slow-moving lines of soldiers. But now, in more recent years, I've come to agree with most people in the Civil War history community that Glory is probably I guess a lot of people said it's probably the best Civil War film ever made. At least in terms of getting the history of the American Civil War out there to the public, it has had more success than other films have. And surprisingly, it always seems like the American Civil War is a big subject for movies. No, not surprising. There's a lot smaller pool for movies about the American Civil War than there is about the Second World War. I think just has to deal with the fact this was, of course, a war before the thing known as cinema existed.
Yeah.
And the American Civil War is always a touchy subject in the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also people think that line warfare is boring. I think that's the other problem, is people think that fighting with muskets and smoothbore artillery is not...
You can't make it into a 2-hour entertainment flick.
Exactly, because like with a World War II movie, it's like, okay, you can get some armored warfare, you can have planes, like you can mix it up a lot, but... Which isn't true, of course. You can make, 18th and 19th century warfare very interesting, if you have a good story to go along with it, which this movie, of course, does. And honestly, the final storming scene of the fort at the end of this movie is probably one of the best fight scenes, big group fight scenes I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and we're going to get to all of that. Now, so I've seen the movie a zillion times, can quote it almost word for word. No, I'm not going to quote word for now. Partly because that'll get us copyrighted. They'd think the movie's actually playing because I'd be saying it that close. No, but you know. So you know, I'm very familiar with this movie and the history that's behind it. Connor, you've only seen it once, and that was just a few weeks ago.
Yes, I saw it for my first time a few weeks ago because there are many, many, many movies in my life that people can't believe I've never seen, and this is one of them. So,
and Jess over here has seen it for all 5 minutes, and it was 5 minutes for 5 minutes ago.
So I know a lot, you could say.
Yeah. So,
you're an expert.
I'm an expert.
So Jessica over here is going to be the avatar for for normal audiences here.
Oh boy, I can
us
be normal.
non-crazy
How's it
people.
feel?
Not normal.
We actually have the pendulum right now of normalcy to insanity, starting with normalcy with Jess. Connor's in the middle.
You
and
really don't know me, my God.
Well, we're talking about in this circumstance.
In this circumstance, okay.
Yeah,
in this circumstance.
Every other
And then I'm over here, I'm going to start citing off random crap, and you're going to be like, what? So, where do we begin with the movie Glory? I think it's also best we also talk about the true story of the 54th Massachusetts.
So, how do we want to do that? Do we want to do true story first, then movie, or kind of?
I think we're going to kind of just bounce back and forth.
I think that makes sense.
Because in terms of generalization, the movie's pretty on point in a general sense. Now, when you get into the nitty gritty and a lot of particulars, this movie can go way off course on what really happened. In fact, it'll even shift the timeline to what actually happened.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that when we were watching the movie.
Oh, so they can have one sentimental scene.
It was a good scene.
It was a good scene, but they moved the timeline way too forward in the movie just so they can have Christmas and glory. So, because the reason is historically, the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all slaves and states in rebellion, was not passed until January 1st of 1863. It did not go in effect until that point. So the United States could not begin officially raising regiments of African-American soldiers until that point. The movie, however, starts in September of 1862 at the Battle of Antietam. And to my knowledge, it's the only large-scale cinematic depiction of the Battle of Antietam. And well, there's a lot of shooting.
Yeah, basically Shaw gets vibe checked along with the rest of his unit by the Confederates.
Yeah,
and he wakes up in the field to see God standing over him.
Yes, he does see God, as in Morgan Freeman, who is a gravedigger following the Union Army. We'll get back to him more later. So Shaw, and it was historically at the Battle of Antietam, the bloodiest single day in American history. He was with the 2nd Massachusetts Regiment. They fought in the cornfield, which is one of the more famous parts of the battle, because they decided, let's go fight in the middle of a cornfield with stalks over our heads, or we can't see each other. This'll end well. You don't see a cornfield in the movie. They walk up to a fence. The Confederates shoot into their face and wrecks the 2nd Massachusetts, and they all go running. And Shaw cowers on the ground, not sure what to do.
To be fair, the guy in front of him literally had his head blown open.
Oh, yeah, his head implodes in front of Shaw.
Very reminiscent to Gettysburg at... I can't remember. You did a video on it.
Yeah. So the movie's just showing you, trying to set up as Shaw has gone through a world of shit, and he's pretty traumatized.
Yeah.
So, but the 2nd Massachusetts performed a little bit better than the movie depicts. They still took losses, I'm not disputing that, and it probably was a shocking experience for anybody involved, considering how bloody that battle was.
Yeah.
Anyways, the movie whisks Shaw away back to Massachusetts to a party being held at his family's house. And keep in mind that Shaw, both in the movie and in real life, was part of a affluent family in Massachusetts. In fact, the Shaw family did have their hands with abolition movements in Philadelphia and also back up in their home in Boston.
Yeah.
So they already were pretty much. They were already pushing for emancipation and things of that nature, which made Shaw a natural candidate when they decided to raise the 54th Massachusetts for colonelcy. Now, the movie shows that he hem-haws a little bit about taking up this role, but he very quickly decides he'll accept it. In real life, he actually rejected the initial nomination, but his family talked him back into it. I think he rejected it more on the fact that he just was so stunned that they would give him it. And he was just like, I don't want this honor,
Yeah, and in the movie, of course, he kind of gets the extra push he needs from his friend Forbes.
Yes, who may or may not be under the influence.
He comes out with some bottles. He's having a good time. But Forbes...
So Dread Pirate Roberts, Jess, he comes out, he's been partying, and he's like, why is Shaw so sad? This is a great moment. We're having fun.
Hey, yo, have some more rum.
Yeah, kind of.
But to my eternal disappointment, I was informed by Readout while we were watching the movie that Forbes is not a real person.
No.
In the 54th history.
No, he's a composite of several of the lower-ranking officers.
Which is a darn shame, because he's probably my favorite character in the entire movie.
Yeah.
Oh, so Carrie Eloise.
Yeah, Carrie Ellis. That's who plays him. That's why I said Dread Pirate Roberts.
So, in the Glory timeline, is he related to our friend General Forbes of the French Indian War?
That's a good question. In our timeline, I guess we can make anything up. He could be also related to the Forbes that tried to drill Brown's provincial army.
Yeah, they're all the same family.
Yeah, actually it's the same Forbes. He time travels. He time travels. He's a time lord. He regenerated from General Forbes to Carrie Elways to be Cabot Forbes.
Wow. You figured General Forbes would have done that before he died of freaking whatever it was that he died here in the U.S. He used to know.
Well, it was one of the situations like when the
the
Seventh Doctor got shot and died because he got shot by gangs in California, but he didn't regenerate until he was in the morgue.
Ah, yeah.
Just things like that. Back to the movie Glory.
He had a colon cancer, that's right.
Oh.
Is that fake or real?
No, so the real
We're rambling.
The real life General Forbes from the French Indian War. We don't know exactly how he died, but we think it was like colon or stomach cancer of some kind. I'm sorry. That's a fact.
Not to be confused with the fictional character Cabot Forbes.
No, he dies in a very different way in this movie.
A very blunt way.
All right.
Yeah, sorry, spoiler, Jess. Yeah.
Oh,
to be fair, he dies standing next to God, so you know.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's a little safe.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha,
God was there. God was there. So Shaw takes the promotion, and they start organizing the regiment. In the movie of Glory, it shows that you're getting people all from across the country. A lot of them seem to be recently freed slaves, people that must have escaped up to the northern states, when historically most of the 54th Massachusetts was raised from northern states. People raised in northern states. A lot of the men were educated, they were literate. You know, some of them came from their own affluent families. Not saying that there are evidence of there were ex-slaves in the regiment, but for the most part, it was free men from northern states, not southern slaves that were escaping.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, the 54th Massachusetts did not provide the most soldiers for the regiment. Considering this was kind of an experimental regiment to see if we can... Because, look, we're talking about 19th century America, very racist America, where people were unsure, can people of dark skin actually fight? I don't know if they'll be able to know how to use a musket and things of that nature. So the 54th Massachusetts was an experiment in the public eyes to see could they raise African-American soldiers. Believe it or not, the state of Pennsylvania supplied the most troops. I believe it was about 30% of the 54th was actually from Pennsylvania.
Interesting. Any from Gettysburg in particular?
I believe there were 2 from the Gettysburg area.
Yeah, because I just know from our many trips to Gettysburg, there was a pretty decent size.
I'm going to tell you one story before we finish. It does tie to Gettysburg about a real life figure. So cool. They all go to Reedville, Massachusetts. They're actually at a railroad junction a few miles south of Boston, and that's where they would drill the regiments. Now, one of the biggest issues...
What kind of trains would have been at this railway junction?
Steam trains.
Well, any particular models? I know you like trains, that's why I asked.
I was focusing on the military history. I kind of shut down my train.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Different parts of the brain.
But the movie was filmed at the it's the Georgia State Railroad Museum. That's where they filmed all the training sequences. Believe it or not, so we can go visit all these filming locations. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
So one of my biggest problems with the movie comes up. That the movie says that they start recruiting this regiment in like late fall of 1862. And as we started with the podcast, that's impossible. They did not start organizing there at the camp until February of 1863, March. So it was much later. So, and I think it does a bit of a discredit to the 54th that they drilled very quickly, that they were whipped into shape far quicker than your average regiment would have been. They had a lot, they were on a time crunch, which makes what they did later on even more impressive. Mm-hmm. And the movie's like, oh, they got to have extra time and things of that nature. No, they didn't. So the first half of the movie really just follows the exploits of the 54th Massachusetts trying to train and deal with a racist society.
Yeah.
Shaw has to deal with he has to deal with a lot of issues. For one, as the movie depicts, the movies depicting the 54th be a lot of ex-slaves, so we're dealing with a lot of illiterate men. There is no discipline, so he's getting a little bit frustrated by the lack of discipline. So he brings in who I always feel scared to say is one of my favorite characters, Sergeant Mulcahy. I don't want to say he's my favorite because the stuff that comes out of his mouth it's not okay for YouTube. Let's just put it that way. It's not okay for YouTube.
Which is funny because the clip that you showed us literally before we started filming is on YouTube.
Well, that's fine. It's if I said it, I would.
Oh, okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but things of that nature, but. He's kind of living in his own world, Mulcahy is in this movie. It's fascinating. Like he is Shaw is on one level, and then Mulcahy's through the ceiling. He's even above God in terms of energy. Just. And when I'm saying God, remember we're talking about a Morgan Freeman playing the Gravedigger, who is now recruited into the 54th Massachusetts. He's one of the soldiers.
Yes.
But they bring Mulcahy in to whip the army and whip the regiment to shape. And my God, the stuff that he says.
Yeah, he has a very...
This is your front! This is your rear! This is your left! And this... Now you're learning, boyo.
Yeah, he has a very colorful and expressive vocabulary.
I said stab, not tickle!
Yep, as I have the sticker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's a...
Stab me!
Yeah. So, but... Mulcahy doesn't necessarily. He does help harden the soldiers, but he also has a damaging effect with the soldiers' connections with their commanding officers, particularly of Shaw, because they just do not want to be berated by this guy. Oh, by the way, the reason they bring Mulcahy in is because he's Irish. I don't think I need to explain more about the Irish and African Americans in 19th century America. And Shaw openly admits that's why he brought him in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, well, no, he doesn't openly. I think Forbes puts it together.
Yeah, Forbes puts it together. Forbes is pretty smart. His character is interesting in the movie because he's come across as really dumb and really smart at the same time.
Well,
Which...
Wow, the old dumb smart.
Yeah.
Gotta keep him on the
Bit of a full Ed, Ed and Eddie package, if you will.
So... We cut back through the film at this point when they're in the camp between Shaw and Forbes, and we cut to some of the soldiers. We only really focus on 4 soldiers. They're all 4 fictitious, although I do believe some of them are sharing traits of some real life stories, especially what I've read about. The first one I gotta get the sheet out. Gotta get back out the magical sheet with all the names.
Well, Readout is the only one here with notes, just as an FYI.
After today, I'm like, okay, I need to take notes because I forget everything.
Oh, no.
Well, especially when we were talking
I'm the
about
note
names in
taker,
86,
it's
I'm
fine.
like,
It's fine, I'm the note taker.
It's like
I'm used to
the
this.
plot of 86. I'm like, I don't know what happened when. I just know what happened.
I didn't go that deep. I just some basic things. So, we have... Let's see who we have. We have John Rawlins. That is God. That is Morgan Freeman's character. Then we have Thomas Cyrillus. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. We just call him Thomas. Andre Brocker plays him. He does a really good job in this.
Very good job.
Yeah, I think it was one of his earliest films, too, that he was in. One of his earliest leading roles. And Thomas is actually probably the best example of what many of the actual 54th soldier was.
And his fashion sense, on point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
He has some of the most excellent suits you will ever see.
Hey, when Mulcahy is trying to use Bonnie Prince Charlie as a way to degrade you, that's actually a compliment.
Yeah.
And Thomas is actually, at least in the movie, he's depicted as being a friend of Shaw and Forbes's, that they've known him since at a young age.
Which, given Shaw's family's involvement in the abolition movement, given where they were living, he probably knew a lot of the men in the unit.
Yeah, okay. I would say it was probable. Then you have Juniper Sharts, who is a runaway slave. Mm-hmm. We're going to call him Juniper. He doesn't go... I don't think they use his name a lot in the movie. That's his.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one I was showing you struggling with the rifle.
Yeah, the rifle, the squirrel hunter.
He definitely he definitely has a stuttering thing.
Yes,
it's a big thing, but he's very bright-eyed about the world. Mm-hmm. Very upbeat prospect, especially considering probably where he came from. That is surprising. And then we have the other end of that coin, which is Silas Tripp, which is played by my man Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Woo!
Tripp is Trip is the bully of the movie.
Yeah, and his character changes the most.
Yes.
Out of any of the actual soldiers in the unit. Because he's definitely... comes off quite gruff in his first couple scenes. He picks on some people. He's not a nice guy.
No, he definitely pokes at Thomas for being having a much better upbringing than most African Americans in America at that point.
Right, yeah. And kind of looks down on him for that. You know, he makes fun of Morgan Freeman for being old.
Yeah, it doesn't work too well, though, because it is gone.
Yeah.
Now, remember, this movie came out in 1989. I think Morgan Freeman's in his 80s now.
I was about to say, so he would have been, what, in his late 40s?
Yeah, because Denzel's in his 60s.
I'll do the research.
Yes.
But to be fair, I will say, for the time, that would definitely be a very old age to be...
Oh, yes, definitely it would have been.
Yeah.
Even back then. He definitely would have been, appears to be in his 40s or 50s at that point. So.
Oh, for sure.
Or at least how the movie depicts him. But it is God, so who knows? He is ageless, perhaps. So that was your four main, and then Trip is growing increasingly...
He was like in his 50s.
50s.
Okay. So you have the situation, so, Shaw's brought in Mulcahy to tighten up the regiment, but it's leading to mixed results. They're definitely becoming more disciplined, but people are really starting not to like Shaw. Which, to be fair, you're not supposed to like your commanding officer, but people aren't even respecting him now. It's getting to the point. And
that's a problem.
And Forbes is starting to get a little worried about Shaw. The Shaw is getting too power hungry or something of that nature. Is like getting lost in his way. It's like, we understand you want discipline, but you shouldn't be killing the men before they go to battle.
Right. And Forbes is definitely like a perfect example of like a mid-level officer. Like, he's able to kind of talk Shaw out of more of his crazier thoughts and kind of level with him and be like, look, you're doing shit you shouldn't be doing. But at the same time, he has a fairly decent relationship with his men. His men seem to respect him.
A lot of the officers seem to enjoy Forbes. Forbes is kind of like the middle. Well, he is the middleman in this.
Yeah. And being a childhood friend of Shaw's and being kind of...
Also, I want to appreciate, it's one of the few films I can think about from this time period where you actually get to see soldiers in tents sleeping. Oh my God, I love this.
On the ground, even.
On the ground. The only problem is, historically, the 54th actually had barracks, from what I've read, at Reedville. So they actually had a little bit better than what the movie shows.
See, but Shaw really wanted to toughen them up, so he said...
No, Shaw really wanted to impress me.
Yeah, he just literally just wanted to depress you.
Yeah, so it is one of the few cases, like, you really think, like, when you watch movies like this, when you actually see people in tents, like, actually, they do a lot of shots within the tent, which is really cool.
Tell you what, when I die, my last words are going to be, I just did all this to really depress, and I'm going to say a random name, so somebody 100 years from now will think that I was speaking specifically about
Oh my God,
them.
that's so funny.
Yeah.
It has to be like it has to be a very common name, too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. Or Michael, I know.
Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor, if you're listening, we're out to get you.
How's Zachary Taylor going to listen to us? He's dead.
That's a different Zachary Taylor.
Yeah, well, but in like 100 years, when this is like a historical artifact.
So somebody's going to name somebody
Zachary
after
Taylor.
a president who had been hundreds of years gone by then?
Yes.
And there's a potential...
I mean, I very well... I would totally name one of my kids after Henry Bouquet. I'm going to level with you.
Fair enough.
Good thing you don't have any kids.
Damn. All right. Well, true. Fair enough.
So, the reason I'm bringing this up, so you have all, you basically have all four of these soldiers basically slowly unwrap, they're trying to hold together. Rollins is just kind of like, I'm pieced out. I said my piece. I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do. Better than digging graves.
Yeah.
Thomas is getting emotionally wrecked.
Yeah, because he's being from the more upper class background.
Yeah, so he's being degraded by Mulcahy in public, and then in private it's being degraded by Tripp.
Yeah, basically everybody's verbally abusing him because he's from a upper class family, basically.
And Tripp is, of course, enjoying the power he's getting, over Thomas and stuff, getting to play his own little, power fantasy, essentially. Eventually, things come to a head when Tripp decides that he can't handle the situations anymore. That, look, we're not even being supplied shoes. This is getting ridiculous. Like,
right.
I mean, legit, Tripp's feet are like falling apart in the movie.
Yeah, they have basically trench foot at this point. Like,
so eventually, Tripp decides that he's going to make a break for a nearby farmhouse because he wants shoes, and he also wants to be fed pretty decently.
Yeah,
so
and
I'm done with the regular army food.
Yeah, and somebody told him that if he goes there, they would feed him and give him new shoes.
Yeah. So he runs off. They find him. They think that he was trying to desert the army. And of course, since Tripp's already been a problem for the regiment, Shaw decides to have him lashed. Now,
there's a few issues with this.
Uh-oh.
so there's, let's just say the fact that why would you? Well, Forbes does tell Shaw why not with the whip, these guys are ex-slaves, because if we're going with the movie standard,
Right.
they're ex-slaves.
Well, and even when they bring him up to the post and they rip his shirt off,
even Mulcahy's kind of like, are you sure?
yeah,
about
because you can
this?
see that Denzel has scars on his back from being whipped when he was a slave, and so right off the bat, when the unit, as you said, at least in the movie, is made up of a lot of ex-slaves, obviously that's not exactly a good way to endear yourself to your men.
But then you add the historical lens,
Which you told me
which
about.
is,
I
we've
thought
always
was
said that a good many of the regiment were free men from the northern states. The United States Army had outlawed flogging in 1861.
right. And you told me there was an incident out west
In 1862.
where somebody tried to flog one of the men in their unit and was basically told, you can't do that.
Yeah.
It's against military regulation now, and we'd all get in trouble if we let you do it, so we're not going to let you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it made for a great scene in the movie.
It makes for a great scene. I
Right.
mean, this is one of your what do I want to say? This is one of your poster childs for Oscar-winning performance moments.
Right.
Oscar
Well,
moments.
especially since...
Not to mention that if you look right here, best supporting actor. Do you want to guess who won that award?
Yeah, well,
boy.
Well, here's the thing. So Denzel actually requested to be whipped for that scene.
Wait, for real?
Like,
Yeah,
he was
I
actually
mean,
whipped.
they gave him obviously it was more of a stunt whip. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it wasn't like
precautions
an
were
actual...
taken. Precautions
Yeah,
were taken.
it wasn't like they took out the cat o' nine tails and sharpened up the barbs
Yeah.
and hit him with it as hard as they could. But
Dedicated actors deployed.
yeah.
Yeah, so he does give this a performance and gives the one teardrop like that advertisement. With
Literally just one tear
Why
runs
is he
down his
saying,
eye.
"Oh man"?
Because
here?
he
is.
doesn't make a sound as he's being whipped.
No.
And it's probably one of the most uncomfortable scenes in the entire movie, but it's so well done.
Yeah,
Very well acted.
This is because
Yeah.
this is definitely for Shaw. This is his big revelation. Like, I'm going around this the wrong way.
Yeah.
So afterwards, Shaw.
Damn, maybe I'm kind of not good at this.
So that's what he felt like. So Shaw goes to Rollins and asks, hey, going forward, could you, I trust you more than the others. Could you tell me what the soldiers are doing and stuff? And then that's when Rollins we need shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know. What part gave it away?
Which is when we get to this moment where Shaw goes to an officers club and he's talking to the quartermaster. And the quartermaster basically tells him, look, your unit's not going to actually get to do any fighting or actually do anything. So why would I give your guys shoes when I can send them to the front? And basically tells him to go pound sand, and that if he wants some bourbon for the holiday, he can get him some booze if he wants.
Oh, and this is also where we get the only reason I think they shifted the timelines, because Shaw's wandering solemnly through the encampments, and Thomas comes up, and I would just like to say to you, Robert, Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only reason they switched the timelines.
Well, that and for the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation.
No, they don't. That's not what they read.
Oh no, that's all they read. They read the crap. I missed.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
I know that's actually occurred.
As soon as you said that, I remember.
We'll get to that. Yeah. So the next day, Shaw in the movie shows up with Rollins and several other people. They show up. Basically, and Shaw goes into the quartermaster and he's like, I want 700 pairs of shoes and 700 pairs of socks and anything else you're holding with us, you piece of rat filth.
Yeah, he basically tells the quartermaster off and then just starts throwing things. He's like, oh, whoosh, just wiping supplies off the shelf.
You just hear pans and everything clashing on the ground. You can't do that, can't I? I'm a colonel. Nasty little cuss. That sticker makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
Shaw puts the fear of God in the quartermaster.
How does every quartermaster in a military movie end up being Crap Game from Kelly's Heroes?
Crap Game of Achilles Heroes was better than this guy.
He was. Crap Game was definitely a character without issues, though.
Well, yeah.
We're going to have to do that on this
all
podcast.
All that money.
Yeah,
all that money. You'll love taking it.
I'll buy it. I make $50 from carrying the machine gun.
Do you have it on you?
No, I don't have it on me. What do you think? I'm some kind of vole? I have money on me? I'll make $100. Do you have it on you?
I feel that man's like, yeah, no.
Well, he's showing around a 30 cal too. That's a heavy gun.
So Shaw gets his way. He gets the shoes for the men. The men are starting to feel a little bit better about Shaw. We get to springtime. They're now ready to get their pay. And this is a truthful part of the movie, although it occurred a little bit later on into 1863.
Yeah.
When they go, the 54th Massachusetts was promised to be paid $13. That's the wage of an average soldier in the Union Army. They made a decision midway through. The federal government decided that they would only be paid $10, and that several more dollars are going to be pulled for their uniform, their clothing, and everything, which means they were only being paid $6. That was the pay for contraband, essentially, which the contraband was essentially recently freed slaves that followed the army doing menial tasks. So they were being they were being viewed as no more as slaves. The movie shows more of a more open protest. It was a little more quieter to protest, but this did absolutely happen to the 54th. The 54th was outraged, and bleeds to one of the best scenes in the movie where Tripp is depicted as the one getting everybody all riled up that they should not accept the pay, and everybody starts tearing up their checks and everything. Then Shaw decides to take a step forward and basically announces, if you won't accept pay, then none of us will. So even Shaw tears up his check and stuff and is like, this is crap.
Which endears him to his men.
Yeah. In real life, Shaw was actually the one when this happened. He kind of told his soldiers, he's like, I ain't accepting that pay, and I advise you none of you will either. So it wasn't as like they were throwing paper in the air or anything in real life, but same basic thing.
And then immediately afterwards in the movie, they get their uniforms.
Yeah, then immediately after, the uniforms just show up. That part of the reason that pay has been pulled out was coming for. Now we're leaving the training sequence. We're leaving the first half of the movie now. They're now going out to fight. They have a wonderful parade scene, which was actually filmed. They filmed most of it down in Georgia. Most of the movie was in Georgia. Of course, the first half of the movie is in Boston. There's actually a historic side street in Savannah that, if you go on YouTube, History Savior 1941 has done a bit of a walking tour of Savannah, Georgia. He actually visited the street where they filmed all this. And it's still on cobblestone and everything. So definitely check his video out if you want to see what the site looks like today. But they have this beautiful scene. They're marching off the bat, and it probably is as close, probably what it looked like historically, because they're in their uniform and everything. But the movie at this point may seem like the regiment was struggling with supplies. That is not true at all. The 54th, as I said, were a big experiment for the state of Massachusetts and for the federal government overall. The state of Massachusetts did not want to have this regiment fail. They're putting a lot of money into it, so these guys were, in terms of clothing and shoes, they got that pretty quickly. Same thing with weaponry and stuff. That was one thing they never had to worry about. So the movie definitely inflates this supply. But I don't necessarily have an issue with it, as there are, of course, other regiments throughout the war that definitely had issues with supplies like that. So, and if this is going to be the only... I always have to understand, as much as I'm a historian, I have to understand, too, that most people are only going to be exposed to historical events like the Civil War for maybe one or two films. And if Glory is going to be the only film, I like them to get a feel for everybody. So I'm not happy with the inaccuracy, but I'm willing to compromise.
It's one of those things where, just like when you're adapting a book to a movie, it's hard to perfectly adapt a historical event to a movie.
Yeah.
Like, there are certain things you just have to kind of either leave on the cutting room floor or modify because, it helps the story better. But overall, I mean, there's a lot of good historical stuff they put in.
So Jess, the audience, half an hour in, we're finally going to the war front.
Yeah.
Because this is a war movie, and they're going to inevitably fight.
To be fair, I feel like a lot of war movies don't really start till they're halfway through. Like, a lot of it's like the basic training and the character building.
Yeah, that's like the first...
So that you actually get to, like, care about the characters before they get brutally murdered.
Oh, yeah, well, that's coming.
Okay.
Hacksaw Ridge being an example that immediately comes to mind. Yeah.
Great film.
Great, excellent film. Yeah.
I love that most media has everyone die.
Yeah.
It's so great for my mental health.
So they're shipped off from Massachusetts down to the South Carolina coast, and they're going to do some coastal warfare. What the Union Army was doing in the spring and summer of 1863 along the South Carolina coast, while all the big stuff's occurring down in Vicksburg and up Chancellorsville and Gettysburg, the Union are trying to get footholds on the Carolinian coast. The war, of course, started in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina at Fort Sumter. So there was the symbolic value of trying to get Charleston back. So up till 63, and even after, of course, they would take these ferries down. They would offload these troops. They would do raids up and down the swamps, then you get on the ships and go back to their bases. So that's what we're seeing depicted. Shaw is initially delighted that they're going to go out in the field. They're very quickly shown, they're very quickly being sent out. Shaw's getting all excited. He's given to the attachment of...
Oh yeah, this guy.
This guy.
Let me tell you, this guy has one line in the movie that I was like, wait, he literally just said that?
Oh man.
Name. I didn't write his name down. Crap.
Which apparently you did say he actually said that.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it.
Well, now I'm curious.
Tell me about the name. The name. What is the name? The name. Right, let's look up history of the 54th Regiment of the Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry by Louis F. Emilio, who was an actual captain of the 54th. That wrote a wonderful memoir about it. That's where I'm getting the information from.
Oh, cool. Book's still in printers, hard to find.
A lot of reprints been made.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think it usually goes around the title today, A Brave Black Regiment.
Okay.
This is the old school one. Okay. Is it Montgomery? I want to say it's Montgomery. Wow, I'm so...
That sounds familiar.
Okay, because there's two. There's one that Bob Gutton plays, who I definitely don't know his name. Then there's the other that Cliff DeYoung plays, who's the guy we're about to talk about. So set the scene before I get his name. Set the scene.
So basically, they're accompanying this guy on his raiding force, which basically they're just going into southern towns and looting them and burning them.
Cute. Okay.
James Montgomery.
And he has a lot of these... They're called trophy units, correct?
Well, there's different names, contraband regiments. Montgomery's commanding the 2nd South Carolina Regiment. Yeah, there's a 2nd South Carolina Regiment. It's a South Carolina regiment. It gets really confusing. There's a lot of South Carolina regiments. You could probably guess why. Yeah. We got Confederate South Carolina regiments. We got Union. So we got these contraband regiments.
They're made up of essentially freed slaves. They really don't have a lot of training. They're just kind of given weapons. And
they're given freaking Zouave pants.
Yeah, Zouave pants.
So you have the 54th over here.
Do you want to explain Zouaves real quick? Because Jess, I know, probably doesn't know this, but I'm...
They're they're influenced from French units in French. They adopted these clothes from France.
Yeah.
Brought into America. They have really fancy, flamboyant. I think.
But it's like red trousers.
There's different. The gist of it is they have a lot of red in their clothing. So red trimming, red pants. Everybody had a slightly different one. It was influenced by the uniform design of the French military in the 1800s. And they're also the favorite regiment of most mainstream reenactors to portray.
Well, the uniforms do look slick.
It does look slick, but it's also very impractical.
Yeah. Well, when does practicality and looking good ever intersect?
Fair point.
Beauty is pain.
There, you heard it.
Yeah.
So
that's the quote of the episode.
So there's mismatch. So the 2nd South Carolina regiment, they actually had red. They had red pants, red Zouave pants. They got the blue shell jackets and stuff, and they're very sharp contrast to the 54th, which sure it's exaggerated, but is probably pretty close. The 54th was pretty well. They're one of the best drilled regiments in the Army. A lot of people who saw the 54th and actually said no, they're the one of the best drilled regiments. Even all the white regiments were impressed with how well disciplined the 54th had become, how well they appeared in their uniforms. Where you had the 2nd South Carolinians, run all around. So Montgomery invites Shaw to come on this expedition, and they end up in the town of Darien, Georgia. And Montgomery basically unleashes the South Carolinian troops on the town, and they start raiding and sacking the whole town.
Yeah, they start burning buildings down. They start looting. At one point, one of his soldiers in the movie gets into a fight with a white woman, and he shoots the soldier because he's like, oh, he shouldn't have laid a hand on her. That's his fault. Shot one of his own men.
Yeah.
Not a good dude, and he has a line. I don't know. Do we want to say the line, or do we have
it written down? Success must be swept away by the hand of God, like the Jews of old. Which is in the official documents of Robert Shaw.
So Shaw does say the guy actually said this, which, again, it's the 19th century, so everybody's a little... But yeah, he comes across as not a very nice character, and his men... The 54th is kind of shocked by the behavior of the units that are under his control, because they're very well trained, very well disciplined for everything that Shaw kind of did to them. And basically Montgomery tells him at one point, hey, we're about to fire this town... your men need to help. And Shaw lodged a protest. It's well, my men aren't going to burn this town. And Montgomery said, well, if you don't, you can dig ditches and fix roads for the rest of the war. And so Shaw reluctantly gives an order for one of his units to take part in the burning of the town that they're in.
Yeah. The whole town historically was burned down. There's very few the town's rebuilt now, but there's I've seen, it's they wiped it out.
Yeah.
And it still is always been a sticking. I don't want to say this. It's always been a stick in the mud when it comes to, I guess, research on the Civil War stuff or things like that. It definitely muddies the waters.
Yeah.
Definitely unveils it was not just the Confederates who were committing war crimes.
Right.
What's just weird is, so the movie definitely villainizes Montgomery. This is really the only time we see Montgomery in his actions.
Yeah.
But historically, even though Shaw appears to be appalled by the raiding of Darien and questioned if it was legal, he also was very impressed with Montgomery and other raids. So I think it was maybe more historically that this was his first exposure to Montgomery, that he was taken aback by how ferocious he was. But then he realized that Montgomery was actually... he was actually fighting in Bleeding Kansas before all this, so he's a bushwhacker and things of that nature. So this is just his tactics. This is what he's used to.
For Jess and the standard audience who maybe doesn't know, can you talk a little bit about Bleeding Kansas?
Essentially, it was the Civil War before it went hot.
Yeah, it's a bunch of essentially backwood raids, more or less.
Yeah, a bunch of people who wanted slavery and a bunch of people who wanted emancipation flooded Kansas when it was about to become a state to decide if it would be a free or slave state, and just started brutally Xing each other off. Yeah, John Brown was involved.
Yeah, John Brown was involved. He murdered a family there.
Yeah, he only murdered, I think, several.
Yeah. But yes, essentially you have you're not on the same side as us? Well, guess you don't have a barn anymore.
So this was the tactics that Montgomery was used to. The raiding was just natural to him.
So really, that prepared him for regular warfare, which at the time wasn't really practiced at all.
So that's the interesting thing, that it's so much. I don't know if it was so much that Shaw was legit angered at Montgomery, or just more this was his first exposure and just was taken aback by it all.
Well, and it seems like Shaw, given his background, probably wouldn't have been exposed to this whole concept of total war, which it's not really total war at that point, but he's still this whole regular we're going to burn towns, we're going to steal shit, that's how we're going to get the South to break.
Yeah. And arguably, it is ultimately what ultimately won the war. I mean, Sherman's March of the Sea partially proves that.
Yeah, burning a...
So anyway, the movie goes for a quick montage, and I'm being stuck doing nothing but labor work.
Yeah. Fixing
Shaw's
roads,
getting frustrated. He's like, are we going to go do anything?
Then we finally get a really good fight scene.
So finally, in the movie, Shaw and Forbes get fed up. They go right to Montgomery's office, and Montgomery's commanding official,
I forgot about this.
I forget his name right now. It's Bob Gutton. So he's a bad guy. Bob Gutton's involved. So he played the warden in Shawshank Redemption. So he imprisoned God. He did.
No chains can hold God.
No. Believe it or not, this actually came out before Shawshank Redemption. Oh,
interesting.
Little did they know. Shaw basically tells Bob Gutton, I'm going to report you to the War Department, and I'm going to reveal all of the things that you've been stealing off of all the plantations and been selling on the black market.
Is there any historical background?
I didn't have time to fully get into this aspect. I don't believe so.
Right.
I don't believe Shaw directly went and blackmailed Bob Gutton.
Yeah, that's a kind of a bold move to be like, hey, I know you're technically in charge of me, but if you don't let me do what I want to do, I'm going to write Uncle Sam a letter telling him you've been doing some
so
bad stuff.
Gutton's like, all right, I'll let you men go fight. So we cut to the which is true, the 54th Massachusetts first direct combat, which was a small skirmish on James Island. The movie definitely dramatizes what actually happened. Because we got cavalry blindly charging the 54th, and they're getting wrecked. I don't know. That Confederate cavalry officer should be reprimanded.
I'm pretty sure he was the guy that got shot and fell off his horse.
With the big beard and stuff, yeah. I think he was drinking. He was drinking some of Forbes' stuff. So, and then afterwards, we have this Confederate regiment move in and actually start a regular fight with the 54th. Casualties are shown to be pretty heavy, far more than they were historically. There's some pretty good melee action. Thomas gets
really good hand-to-hand combat.
Thomas gets wounded. He gets stabbed with a bayonet.
He survives.
He survives. It won't be the first time he gets stabbed with a bayonet.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. But Thomas refuses to go back. But it's a resounding success for the 54th. James Island skirmish. So 14 of the 54 were killed, 18 were wounded. It was a little bit higher than I thought it was. Sorry for the
So,
credit.
that's 33 casualties total?
That's a little bit higher than I was thinking. I thought it was only like 3 or 4.
Out of how many men?
At this point, the regiment started out with just about 1,000 men when they went to service. They were a big regiment, and I think they had about 600 or 700 by the time they got down that were in active service on the coast.
Okay.
Still,
33 out of 700. That's
for a skirmish.
for a skirmish. Yeah, that's a sizable casualty.
Yeah, they don't show it in the movie, and I really wish they did because it would help for one of the more emotional climaxes of the film. They actually helped save the 10th Connecticut, who were trying to pull out. So the 54th went in to plug in the line and kind of helped the 10th Connecticut escape. They don't show that in the movie. I really wish it did because it'll make sense for what comes later.
Do you think the 10th Connecticut's that unit that moves past them? Right?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, because so they're working on the road. This other unit comes by. There are some words exchanged, and there's almost a fist fight between men of the 10th Connecticut and men of the 54th.
God enters.
Yeah, God intervenes to make peace, as he often does. But what's nice, though, is that same guy from the 10th that kind of started all that, he's present for the climactic battle of the movie or as they're getting ready to leave.
So,
yeah, that guy.
Yeah, they're all excited. They get the news that, Lee's been defeated at Gettysburg, Vicksburg's fallen, and the war will be over by Christmas! Yeah.
Never trust a man who tells you the war will be over by Christmas. Actually, shoot him on the spot, personally.
We got a pretty good scene where Shaw goes to Tripp. Tripp's kind of wandered off from the regiment, and Shaw wants to... a lot of the men in the regiment want to offer Tripp the opportunity to carry the national colors.
Which he says he doesn't want to.
No, and his issue is he doesn't see the point in the war.
Right, because he...
What is he getting in it for him? Because he's like, when this is all over, what is it in it for me? Yeah, I'm a runaway slave who's nobody's wanted me my whole life, and you're not going to want me once I'm done being a soldier.
Right. So he's very much like, I'm fighting this war for my own reasons, and not because this is the American cause or whatever. So
I need to stay alive.
Yeah, so he's basically said, flat out refuses, and Shaw takes it pretty graciously. He says, no, I understand. And
yeah, I respect that.
I respect that.
Yeah.
Which, definitely having those kind of mixed emotions about carrying the
flag.
I
forget, did Morgan Freeman bitch slap Denzel Washington before or after this? I think it was before.
It was before.
Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, there's a really good scene. It might be my favorite scene in the whole movie where Tripp's bullying.
It's after the fight with the 10th Connecticut.
Okay. Yeah, it's after the because after they get into a little scrap with the 10th Connecticut, Tripp's going on to watch duty, Thomas is going on watch duty. Tripp continues to berate him, and Thomas just has enough and finally starts fighting with Tripp. And God enters the picture and tells them to ante up like men, and Tripp just starts berating Rollins,
who at this point
is in racial slurs.
Who at this point is an officer above him.
Yeah, so by this point,
God was promoted.
God was promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's Sergeant Major now.
Yeah.
But Morgan Freeman does bitch slap Denzel Washington, and it's beautiful.
To be fair, that kind of straightens him out a little bit.
It does.
Man, maybe I have just been kind of a big dick this entire time.
Maybe I am a little bitch.
Yeah.
So, what actually happens historically is the 54th and all the other regiments on James Island are told to pull out immediately. They're needed to support a second assault on Fort Wagner. Now, we don't get to see it in the movie, and probably for time reasons. The journey that the 54th took to get to Fort Wagner is ridiculous. So, in the matter of just 2 days, they pulled off James Island, took several ferries, took several marches through swamps and through sand dunes in the middle of a thunderstorm, with no sleep, with no food.
How many miles?
I don't know the exact mileage. I mean, it was enough that I had to go 2 days.
Yeah, barely any sleep. Shaw definitely seems out of it when he gets to the command meeting to talk about the assault on...
I also love how they're just perfectly out of range while they're talking nonchalantly from the fort being bombarded.
Yeah. So, Fort Wagner's being bombarded from the sea by the Union Navy, which... They say, the fort's been bombarded for like 4 days at this point?
Yeah, it's been for several days now.
Which kills a whopping 12 Confederates.
Yeah. And keep in mind that this was not the first time they tried to assault it.
Yeah, so Fort Wagner, I guess, geographically, it's at the end of a neck in Charleston Harbor, right? Mm-hmm. Or at the outskirts of Charleston Harbor. So there's one, very narrow sand bar out to where Fort Wagner is. And there's essentially no cover besides the sand dunes. And that is the ground that the men of 54th are going to have to charge across.
You keep going.
It's just looking at the terrain the way they have it set up in the movie, you can tell it's going to really suck.
And from this point forward, this is where you're basically going to hear me say nothing but praise for the movie. Because going forward, the inaccuracies are effectively done.
Yeah, because Shaw, for reasons that seem illogical, volunteers the 54th to be the first wave of the assault on Fort Wagner.
Both in the movie and historically.
Yeah. Now, there's, I guess, a bit of... Nobody really knows why he volunteered them, whether it was because he wanted to show their fighting spirit, or maybe he was just delirious.
I think we can...
For 48 hours.
Yeah, I think Connor's been starting to come to. It's like, are you sure this isn't from the lack of drink and food?
Yeah, I think that there might have been some delirium involved. At least that's the way it looked to me. But they're granted their opportunity, and there's a photographer we briefly meet earlier on in the film. Not a photographer, newspaper. Yeah, newspaper correspondent guy. And
I think his name's Everett Pierce, but I could be mistaken.
But Shaw, as they're marching to get ready for the assault on the fort, gives this newspaper correspondent... Yeah, there's a picture of what they got to march across to get to the fort.
Oh, wow.
But he gives the newspaper correspondent his letters and says, hey, if anything happens to me, make sure these get home. And the 54th, I guess in real life, when they start charging, it's at dusk, right? Like as the sun's going
they're going just as the sun sets.
Which, in the movie, they start charging when it's still kind of light out. But how many yards are they going across? It's like 400 or 500 yards.
Yeah,
across open sand dunes.
Yeah, and the sand is narrowing. It's narrowing.
As it gets closer,
it becomes a choke point because you have the swamp that comes right up to the sand. Then you got to get through the moat.
Yeah, the fort has a moat.
And then you have to ascend the 30-foot sand parapet to get into the fort.
So the fort, like I said, it's been bombarded for 4 days at this point. However, as is often the case, and would be the case literally countless times during the First World War, is no matter how long and hard you bombard a position, if it's well built, there's going to be people left alive by the time you actually go in and take it. And the Confederates took a whopping 12 casualties over the course of the 4-day bombardment. And as soon as the Union started marching across the neck, the Confederates just left their shelters, got up on the wall, and started unloading on them. So you just see the 54th getting torn to shreds as they're running across this neck. They're taking cover where they can. They eventually get to the moat, slide down into the moat. And essentially, they're up against the wall, this 30-foot wall of the fort, with the Confederates like leaning over and firing down into them. Like, horrible. The movie films this very well, and I know I was talking to Reed out when we were watching it. It felt like a World War I like trench assault. Because eventually, they finally get ready to charge over the walls. Shaw grabs the company color bearer, or the regiment color bearer, and starts charging up the hill with him. Color bearer is instantly shot, flag drops. Shaw reaches to pick it up and gets shot like 4 times and dies. And Denzel, who previously had said he didn't want to pick up the flag, runs, grabs it, rallies the soldiers. So him, Forbes, and God, and Thomas run up the fort wall. They make it over into the fort and start fighting.
Tripp's killed before he gets over the top.
Yeah, unfortunately. And they cross the wall. They get into hand-to-hand fighting with the Confederates. There's a whole bunch of bayonets, musket butts, close-range firing. And really the last that we see the 54th is they round a corner in the fort, and the Confederates have a line of cannons set up with, I'm assuming, canister shot. Big cloud of smoke, and that's kind of where the battle ends.
Yeah.
The movie.
Officially, of the 600-plus men that went into Fort Wagner, 250 were killed, wounded, or captured, including Shaw.
Yeah. So, after the battle, so the 54th, there were multiple Union units involved in the attack on Fort Wagner.
Nobody made it as far as the 54th.
No, 54th were the only unit that made it over the wall. They were pushed back, unfortunately, and suffered severe casualties. After the battle, Shaw was thrown into a mass grave with his men, and there was a push by the Union military to recover his body, but his family said that he would have preferred to be buried with his men. So he was left there, and I believe he said Fort Wagner is now underwater.
Yeah, most of Morris Island, which it rests on, has become swamped as sea levels have risen and stuff. So he's now, they're all the Shaw and the rest of the 54th are now several feet under the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And that's where the movie ends.
Yeah, that's kind of where the movie ends. Everybody dies.
Now,
Damn.
The 54th did not end there, of course.
Right.
They got a new colonel and things of that nature. They kept fighting through the war. They even fought... their biggest battle was not actually Fort Wagner. It was actually at the Battle of the Rusty, the only major battle in Florida during the Civil War.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, late winter of 1864. Similarly, they got wrecked by gain more badges of honor. And I'm not sure how true it is. I only heard it from this documentary that's about the 54th. The documentary claimed that in the flight from Ulusty, that the 54th had to get off the train because it broke down, and they actually had to pull the train because they had all the supplies and everything. I can't find any other source for that. The documentary said.
How many men would it take to pull a fully loaded train?
I don't know.
4 at least.
I mean, at least you're not wrong.
And after almost 2 years worth of not being paid, they finally did. Did
they actually get full pay?
They did finally get their pay at the end.
Well, good for them.
Yeah, they did finally get their pay. Yeah, like I said, once the movie gets into the Battle of Fort Wagner, it is one of the most authentic depictions of a Civil War battle I've ever seen on film. There's not much to say. It is awe-inspiring and horrifying.
It's bloody and brutal and awful to look at.
Yeah.
But in a good action movie kind of way.
In a good action movie way. And then that battle is often credited as what ultimately... That confirmed to the public that the 54th Massachusetts was a success, that even though they didn't win the battle, they proved that they can fight just like any other soldier. And the United States began authorizing the raising of many more all African-American regiments. Now, the federal government didn't, advance too much. They segregated all the regiments. They had the United States colored troops.
Yeah.
Actually, I think only the 54th and 55th Massachusetts were the only two of the colored troops that actually had like a state designation. I think all the rest were just federal regiments. And ultimately, I think it's about 10% of the United States military when the war concluded was made up of African Americans. And Lincoln went on record and credited them helping to win the war.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And unfortunately, the military would continue to be segregated through the end of World War II, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Korea would have been the first war that was,
That's late.
That's
like,
yeah,
another 100 years after glory.
Well, and another Civil War tie into the World War, since that's my house. I know I've talked to you about this many times.
Connor's like, this is my house, is my rules.
Well, that's kind of where I live, is in the World Wars. There's an excellent account by a news correspondent from the First World War. He has a memoir called And They Thought We Wouldn't Fight. But in it, he actually records the landing of the first black American soldiers in France during World War I. And they were actually wearing Civil War surplus Union uniforms when they landed in France. And I've never seen a photo of the event. I don't know if one exists. But the image of them wearing these Union uniforms coming ashore in France as part of the American Expeditionary Force is just so cool to me. Because it's hard to think back now because the Civil War just feels...
It also shows how inept our country was going into the 20th century.
Yeah, going into World War I, we were not great. We got better.
I think so.
Yeah, but it's also the Civil War was only 50 years prior going into World War I. So yeah, which is hard to think about. Yeah, it's hard to think about.
You look at the Civil War and then World War One, and
the Civil War revolutionized American military technology.
Yeah,
and the crazy thing is, especially all the European powers had war observers?
Yeah.
In the Union and Confederate armies during the Civil War.
There were Europeans observing the conflict.
And apparently they went home and not a lot changed, because then we had the Franco-Prussian War.
They didn't learn a lot.
They didn't learn a lot, because in the Civil War you have trench warfare. You have the first use of Gatling's guns.
Yep.
The first use of kind of like multi-shot weaponry. And the absolute devastation, the high casualties from the Civil War as a result of technology meeting these outdated tactics. And you would have hoped that the observers from the Civil War would have gone back to Europe and said, hey, we need to make major changes. But that didn't happen. Whether they tried and weren't listened to, or they just didn't learn the lessons. So you have the Franco-Prussian War, which is bloody and brutal, which again should have been a wake-up call to Europe, but it wasn't. And then when World War I starts, that's when you get the absolutely atrocious suffering of the First World War, where you have, again, essentially 100-year-old tactics with very modern, tanks, artillery, machine guns, planes. So there's a lot that should have been learned from the Civil War that wasn't. Yeah. But I guess hindsight's 20/20.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So we're approaching the hour mark. We're going to wrap things up. Before we do, I think we're going to go through some favorite characters. Connor, you want to start?
As I said, Forbes is probably my favorite character. He seems like the kind of officer you'd want to be serving under. And he's a really good foil to Shaw. He kind of helps keep Shaw grounded. He's kind of like struggling with kind of coming into his own leading the unit. And he's also a good touch point with the men as well. And, has some pretty good lines, pretty good interactions throughout the film, and manages to make it to the very end of the battle of the of the
he
fort.
actually gets to lead him forward in the movie.
Yeah, he actually gets to take over after Shaw gets
he gets to be Colonel for all
shot
5
a few
minutes.
times. Yeah,
Probably for me. I mean, oh god,
there's so many great characters.
I mean, for me, and it's me being into the American Civil War for such a long time. This has been ingrained into my life. This movie has its quote. This is like one of the most quotable films to me, Pigs of Nature. So there's so many great characters. Probably off the top of my head, I don't like saying it, but okay, he makes so many good memes.
Yeah.
He's so quotable. Although you shouldn't quote what he's saying. He's living in his own world, and it's like I weirdly respect that, but I don't condone what he's saying.
Yeah.
I probably also really much like Trip. Trip goes through the most character development.
Absolutely.
He definitely is a fascinating just to see somebody come to this, see him open up, stop being a bully, learn maybe I need to stop being angry at everybody else around me for all of our issues.
Wow.
Maybe I should try to take a proactive approach to solving some problems.
We love a good character arc.
Yep.
Yes, everybody loves a good character arc. And again, there's a reason. I don't normally care about the Academy Awards, but there's a reason he got Best Supporting Actor, Denzel Washington, a man, Denzel. And now I know, Jesse, didn't get to watch the movie, but from what you've heard from us and things, what would you say, if you would go watch it, what would be a character you're most looking forward to?
The guy in that one clip you showed me with the gun.
He
seemed nice.
Jupiter?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jupiter Sharks.
Yep.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. He doesn't get like much of a character development or anything, but it's interesting seeing him like have being freed from South Carolina, running up there. He's getting drilled into the army. That he comes back. He definitely is like, oh wow.
Well, and with his stutter too, there's a great scene where they're all sitting around the campfire and he actually gets up.
Oh yes, that is his best moment. When
he actually kind of like works.
They
through
have
his
a
stutter.
kumbaya moment. They're all singing by the campfire, which is fantastic.
Yeah, they're clapping, they're singing praise music, and they're kind of like praying and hanging out.
because they realize that the colonel has just gone completely off the rails.
Yeah, the colonel just signed us all up to die, so I guess we better pray.
And also, Morgan Freeman plays good characters.
Well, yeah,
Morgan Freeman's good name.
Yeah, you're gonna. Yeah, he is God.
He's
So,
God.
and I know before we end here, we didn't talk about this, but Broderick looks stunningly like the real Shaw.
Yeah,
there is a
Matthew
photo
Broderick
of him.
He's very close.
Which hopefully you put up on screen, Shaw versus Broderick. But he was like perfect casting.
Just about the same age too when they filmed it. So, well, thank you folks for watching part 2 of episode 1 of HeterochroMEDIA. So, if you liked what you saw, be sure to hit the like button down below. If you want to be updated when the next part comes out, part 3, where we compare the movie Glory with the anime 86, be sure to subscribe to HeterochroMEDIA. And also be sure to follow us and listen to our podcast where podcasts are available. Well, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in part 3.
See ya.
Bye.